As you say in your book, Edward Snowden was inconceivably calm in Hong Kong and felt profoundly at peace with what he'd done. You write he once joked, "I call the bottom bunk at Gitmo." Talk about who Edward Snowden was and is. What is his background? You reveal things in this book that most people haven't talked about before.
Yeah, I mean, to me, this is, from my own personal experience, probably the most stunning part of the story. And it's what I spent a long time in Hong Kong trying to figure out and investigate through asking him questions and then thinking about as well. And I still think about it, which is what would lead a seemingly ordinary 29-year-old with his entire life ahead of him, someone very well-adjusted by all appearances with a good job and a very good income and a great career and a girlfriend who he loves and a family who's supportive, to give up his entire life to literally risk decades, if not the rest of his life in prison, not to enrich himself or to extract vengeance on somebody, but in pursuit of a political ideal, to confront an injustice that he believes is taking place. What actually takes place in someone's mind and in their spirit and in their soul that leads them to engage in such an obviously self-sacrificing act? I mean, that's a really hard but important question to think about. And what really struck me most about him was that he grew up as a son of essentially a family that worked for the federal government. His father was in the Coast Guard for 30 years. I think you could describe him as lower middle class. He grew up in a very kind of ordinary home. He actually didn't even finish high school because he never was fulfilled by high school, despite how obviously intelligent he is. But he's somebody who is just very ordinary. I mean, he didn't have family wealth or family connections or any prestige or position or power.
And he grew up where?
He grew up in Virginia, essentially. And he was born in North Carolina and then grew up in Virginia. And, he was somebody who was instilled with the sort of traditional conceptions of patriotism as well. I mean, after he didn't finish high school, the first thing he did was enlist in the U.S. Army because he wanted to go fight in the Iraq War, which he thought was a noble endeavor. He had believed the propaganda that the war was about liberating the Iraqi people, and he got to basic training and was disillusioned when he said the officers training them were talking a lot about killing Arabs and very little about liberating anybody. But even then, he devoted himself to working at NSA and CIA and working for the U.S. government.
In this training, he broke his legs.
He broke both of his legs, which is the reason why he ended up not going to the Iraq War. He very easily could have. But even back then, it's interesting. You can look at that in one sense as well. He had this incredible journey where he did this amazing reversal because he was so patriotic in that traditional sense of how it's conceived of, that he was ready to go fight in the Iraq War, and then 10 years later he becomes this major whistleblower. To me, they're really the same kind of act. They grow out of the same sort of way of thinking about the world, and that is that he was willing to sacrifice his own life in 2003 to enlist to go fight in the Iraq War because he felt it was his moral duty to help people who were being oppressed. And 10 years later, that's essentially the same thing that he did. He sacrificed his liberty and his life in order to help people who he thought were being oppressed. It really comes out of the same moral code. And the fact that this individual with no power was knowingly risking everything in his life for a political cause and really ended up changing the world, I think is a remarkable lesson for everybody. It's something that certainly inspired me and has shaped how I think about things and probably will for the rest of my life.
Now,